So, if I was on my first slide right now, it would be telling you that I am Nick Cano. I'm 21. I've been breaking computers since I was 12. Professionally, I'm authoring a book for the No Starch Press on game hacking. I develop bots for online games, and I also do malware analysis and detection at my day job. For hobby work, I like vulnerability discovery and rootkit and malware development, and that's kind of really related to my game hacking stuff. So this presentation is going to talk about, let me fix this. Okay, so this presentation is going to talk about just kind of the world of game hacking. It's not going to be so technical, so you're not going to walk out of here like a pro game hacker, but it is going to tell you about kind of just the tools game hackers use, the methods they use, and the fight between game hackers and game companies. So we're going to start off just talking about an overview, and then we're going to go into tools of the trade, all the methods that game hackers use for full control, and then we'll talk about the moral and legal implications, and that's really the main point of this talk. I'm using my non-existent slides to kind of guide my talk. So what is game hacking? Game hacking is automating gameplay. There's a lot of things you can do. You write bots when you're hacking games. And so there's like cave bots, which are bots that can walk around in the game and hunt and kill monsters, collect gold, do whatever, and get you levels. And that's normally what you're going to sell is a cave bot. And then some people make aim bots, maybe for like first-person shooters that'll automatically aim their gun and then they shoot, headshot, dead, they win. And then there's auto healers. Some people just don't want to be bothered healing in the game, so they have it detect when your health is low, press a button, okay, you've done healed. And then there's combo bots. So in like PvP heavy games, you might make a bot where like, when my friend shoots this spell, I'm also going to shoot this spell, and then you just have 10 kids shoot a spell and there's a headshot and the guy's dead. So all of these things can be really profitable. And then there's also other bots that people will write, which not so much is profitable, but they're normally integrated into the more advanced stuff. And these like heads-up displays where you might show extra information, like the combo bot just did this much damage, or like you just got hit for this much damage in the past second, and stuff like this. Just things to make it easier for the people playing. And then there's like extra sensory perception bots, like wall hacks or floor hacks or spying up a level or seeing someone through a mountain and stuff like this. And some game hackers also write recorders and replayers. Like there's a tool called LOL Replay for League of Legends that can record the games. What it does is it captures all the packets and then just replays them to the client at any time so you can watch it. Stuff like that. So game hacking started probably when online gaming started, to be honest. I mean, as soon as something new comes out, hackers want to break it. So game hacking's been around for a while. But if you want to look at like the golden age when bots were most effective and they were best, it's probably late 90s, early 2000s, when online gaming was becoming prevalent, but the games were still simple enough to manipulate easily. So games like Tibia, Ultima Online, and RuneScape all came out around 97, 2000. And these games, if you play them, you'll realize a lot of people use bots on these games just because of how simple their architecture is. Where's my water? And then there's a question of why do we do it? Why do we hack games? A lot of people do it for fun. I started out 14-year-old kid. I saw people with bots. I was like, cool, I want to do that. So it's a challenging hobby for someone who's into hacking. It's really fun. It's also great practice for anyone trying to learn reverse engineering or just development in general. Some people do it for the reputation. It's cool to say to all your friends in the game, look, I made this bot, go use it. And then profit. And this is the main motivation for a lot of the really good game hackers is profit. You can get in-game gold, an extreme amount of it, and real-life money as well. People make six figures. People make millions of dollars selling bots. So it's an actual real business. So if I had slides, you'd see this pretty graph. But I have a case study of a game called Tibia. No one's ever heard of this game. So in 2011, they reported that after expenses, they made $1.8 million. Now, estimated from my income, the income of other bot makers, and the income of everyone I know in the botting community for that game, the botting community made about $1.1 million. So only $700,000 less than the game itself. So it can be, profit can be a huge motivation for game hackers. And then another case study, if you look at World of Warcraft, which many more of you have heard of, the guy who created bots called Pocket Gnome and Shadowbot made a company called Ceiling Fan Software. He made $289,000 in the time he sold these bots. And then there's a guy, Mike Donnelly, I believe is his name. He gave a game hacking talk at DEF CON a few years ago. He had a company called MDY Industries that made a bot called Glider, and it made $4 million in its lifetime. So tools of the trade. If you're a game hacker, one of the number one things you need is called Cheat Engine. It's a memory scanner, so you pull it up, you attach to your game, you say, oh, I have 500 health right now, so you put in the value 500, hit scan. Now you see every memory address where 500 is, right? Now you let your health change, now it's 480. You put 480 in, hit scan again. You do that until you have like one result, maybe two results, doesn't matter at this point, they're probably both representing health. Now you know what your health is, so now you can make an arbitrary program that just reads this one memory address in the game and hits a button, now you have an auto healer, right? So it's a really powerful tool. It's also great for writing, you can write scripts in Lua to easily manipulate memory. It's great for prototyping. So if you say, oh, I want to make some hack that manipulates memory in some way, it's great for testing. OllyDbg is another great tool that people use, or IDA or whatever you want to use, any debugger really. You can manipulate games code, you can step through it, see what it's doing. It's really powerful. If you're really serious about game hacking, it's something you definitely can't do without. And then of course there's Process Monitor and Process Explorer. They're just God mode. So like you drop Process Monitor, you want to figure out how is this game loading map files. Maybe you want to modify the map and find the code that's touching it. So you look at your Process Monitor log, you find the thing that's saying read file on something 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 dot map. You double click it, now you have a full stack trace of all kernel mode and user mode code that calls it. And now you can find exactly where the game touches that map file. And then of course a good development environment is key. I use Visual Studio, some people use Notepad, others use Vim and GCC. It's really up to you, but most game hackers stick to low-level compiled to native code stuff because they have a lot of control over the game. And then once you have your toolkit and once you've reverse engineered a game, there's a lot of things you can do with that. You can manipulate memory. Let's say you reverse engineer the list of creatures in the game, right? And it has some value in the structure that says this creature's not visible. Well, now you iterate through that list, you slap them all to 1, and now every creature is visible. You see every creature even if you're not supposed to, stuff like this. Or you can inject a DLL. DLL injection is really powerful. It's also really detectable. So there's a debate, some game hackers just, they don't touch it. I do it all the time. So you can inject a DLL and you can like hook functions. So let's say the game's calling DirectX draw text function, right? So you look at the text that's being drawn and, oh, it's your enemy name. So now you know where the enemy name is being drawn on the screen, move the gun to that position, hit a button, aimbot. Where am I at? And you can do a lot of other things with hooking as well. It's great for drawing too, drawing HUDs. You can hook like drawing player name function again and maybe draw stuff under them like they have this much health if it doesn't normally show that. So it's great for that as well. Stealth methodology is another big thing. Games will try to detect bots. They will ban people who use them, and that's not fun. If you're selling a bot, your users get banned, you're not selling a bot anymore. So you really have to pay attention to stealth. So one thing, like the first thing someone does if they're trying to hide from client-side detection in a game is removing any injected DLLs from the module list. So they grab process environment block, find the module list, take it out, and now the game doesn't know your DLL is injected unless it uses some advanced techniques. And then there's like randomizing the names of your processes in Windows. So instead of bot.exe, every time you start it up, it's ask.exe, some random text, right? And then there's hiding bot artifacts using rootkits. So maybe you just hook every single file function that the game could possibly call, and you just make sure it never shows your files in memory, simple user mode rootkits. Or if you want to get really advanced, you might manual map the DLL in memory with no headers and do all the relocations yourself and do some crazy advanced stuff. If you're up against Blizzard or something, that's something you definitely need to do if you're injecting. And another method you'll use to keep games from detecting you is anti-reversing. So maybe you'll take your PE header once you inject a DLL, or once your process forks, you just blank out that PE header of everything but import tables and the essentials the process needs to run. So it's harder to detect. Or because once you corrupt that, they attach a debugger. Debugger might get confused, right? If you take out the entry point or whatever, depending on the type of debugger. You can pack your code, so you have a DLL packed into your resource section. You decrypt it at runtime, you manual map it into memory, all your code's there. It makes it really hard to reverse engineer. Or there's also debugger detection, which is really common. There's many ways to do it. And the fun thing is hindering analysis upon detection. Like me, I like to blue screen them if they're debugging my process. So you can call set process is critical from NTDLL, and now if your process has debug rights and it dies, computer blue screens. So detect the debugger, hit exit after calling set process is critical, blue screen, they lost everything. So that's one of my favorite methods. Moral and legal implications. This is one thing you really have to think about. There's the moral aspect of, if a game gets overrun with bots, you've basically killed that game. There's no fun left, right? And then there's the legal implications of game companies will seriously sue you if you ruin their game. If you look at how bots affect virtual worlds, botters get large advantages. So they have more in-game assets, more items, they have more gold, they go to work and they come back, they have 5 more levels above you, and they might have enhanced PvP abilities because they have their combo bots or their aim bots or whatever. So the economy becomes extremely inflated because of this. Gold becomes abundant, cash for gold services thrive, and it's immensely hard for new players to come into a game and play it when you have level 400s running around with infinite gold and you're a level 1, like, well, what do I do? Oh, someone just killed me. And the game mechanics also change. Sometimes games will implement new mechanics or new ways of playing the game to make it easier for fair players to keep up with bots, but that inherently kills the game. It's not what it used to be. It's easier or it's different, so that's also an issue. So one case study I have here is a game called Tibia again. In 2007, if you wanted to spend $30 to buy gold in this game when the gold was much more challenging and there were no bots, you would get maybe 75,000 gold for $30 if you're lucky in 2007. Now in 2014, game is overrun with bots. You spend $30, you have 4 million gold. Go crazy. Another case study on Tibia is in 2009, the game had been around for 12 years. The top level was level 430, and the 1000th level was level 220. Now in 2014, which is 5 years later, the 1000th level is 398 and the top level 744. That seems like double. The experience difference there is actually almost 6 times. So in the 5 years since bots became prevalent in this game, people are 6 times higher level than they were in the 12 years that the game was played manually, which it's a huge deal. So when game companies see this happening to their games, they obviously want to take out the botters. So they'll implement detection methods. Blizzard has Warden. Some game companies have their own proprietary software, but most companies go with out-of-the-box solution like Valve Anti-Cheat or Punkbuster or GameGuard or HackShield. The problem with these is they're just broken by nature. So when they detect people, which they're not always legit detection, sometimes the detection is just broken, the player never botted, they'll just delete the account. Sometimes they'll ban them, but normally they delete their accounts, and whatever money they spent on that game is gone. And it's very expensive for players, whether they bought it or not, if the game is pay to play. Like if you have to pay $60 for a copy of this game and you're banned, then you probably don't want to bot. And like I said, tens of thousands of fair players have been wrongly banned in the past due to bugs. An example of this is Punkbuster. So recently, actually, in October of 2013, there was a false positive for their Battlefield 4 detection. Something like 2,000 to 4,000 players just got banned. and they didn't get their accounts back for a week, and that's like a $60 game, right? And then back in 2008, there was actually a group of hackers that was like, well, hey, Punkbuster just arbitrarily scans memory. We should attack it. So they open up IRC and they go into some high populated channels and they just spam signatures, bot signatures in IRC. Everyone with the IRC channel open just gets banned instantly, right? So just completely taken out. So it just shows how broken the detection can be in some instances, because it just scanned memory of every process, not processes with handles to the game, not game processes, not processes that open after the game, just everything. I had one other case study and I totally lost it. So Valve Anti-Cheat actually has a much worse track record than Punkbuster. There's been 7 times since it was released in early 2000s that it's wrongfully banned people. So the initial release was just banning people at random for what they call faulty memory. I don't even know what that means, but it was pretty bad. And then same version and a few versions after that would ban players who are using a wine equivalent for gaming, Sediga. I've never heard of it. But anyone who was using that, which was like wine but for games, would get banned on Linux. So that was pretty bad. In 2004, there was a server-side glitch that banned like 12,000 people. Funnily enough, it happened on April 1st, so I don't know if they were just joking around or what. July 2010, another 12,000 people were banned on Call of Duty because Valve Anti-Cheat, which is made by the guys who make Steam, thought a Steam update was a bot. Steam replaced the DLL in place while the game was running, and VAC was like, oh, that can't be good. Banned, 12,000 people gone. So in 2011, more COD players were banned due to being infected by malware. So this malware is walking around with a bot signature for some reason, and it's getting a bunch of people banned. And then in 2011 and 2014, there were undisclosed bugs that got another handful of people banned on VAC. So bot detection can be really broken in some instances. So instead of going after the players, sometimes game companies decide, let's go after the hackers, the people who are making the bots. So like game companies will sue you if you make a bot and they get mad at you. There are a few instances of this I'm going to talk about. First, a small anecdote. I made a tool for a game called League of Legends. My tool was called LOL Oracle, and what it did is whenever the loading screen pulled up, it just showed like the players' ranks and their win-loss ratio, how many times they played that champion, stuff like this. So Riot Games, the game company that made League of Legends, they had a website for tools like this where it says, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. If you're in a gray area, send us an email. Here's our email address. So for 2 weeks, I'm sending them emails like, hey, I made this tool. I want to release it. I don't want to piss you off. Can you respond? Here's what it does. Here's the code. Let me know. I get nothing back. So whatever, 2 weeks has gone by. I buy a website template, buy a host, put up a website, announce it on Reddit. Almost immediately, I get a message on Reddit. Hi, my name's Dave Pritchett. I'm from Riot Games. Can you add me on Skype? I want to talk to you. I had this guy on Skype. Basically what he has to say is, you need to shut this down or we're going to send a cease and desist. He basically told me, look, the lawyers just wanted to send you a cease and desist because we don't like this thing, but I didn't want it to go to legal if it didn't have to, so I'm asking you nicely or we might take you to court. Literally within an hour of releasing this thing after emailing them. So some more intense instances of this can be seen with World of Warcraft. They really go after bot makers. So I mentioned both Ceiling Fan Software and MDY Industries earlier. Ceiling Fan made $268,000. Blizzard in 2012 reamed them in court for $7 million. $7 million settlement because they made $268,000 or $98,000 selling bots. Then in 2006, much earlier, MDY made $4 million. They got reamed for $6 million by Blizzard as well. So TLDR, if you piss off game companies, you're fucked. Also RuneScape. There was a bot for RuneScape, and Jagex, the people who make RuneScape, basically said, you can't make this, we're suing you. Once the lawsuit finished, there was an undisclosed amount of money paid, But the people who develop the bots, if they touch RuneScape, talk about RuneScape, or touch any other Jagex game, they have to pay $1 million. That was part of the court settlement. So they just said, don't go anywhere near our stuff ever again, or you're going to have to pay us a lot of money. So they take it very seriously. Okay, that's it. I wish I had my slides because I'd have some better visual representations. I'll open it up to Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, actually, I have a good case study in and of itself. About, I'd say, sometime around mid to early last year, a game called Arma 3 had frankly, a worm that was a game hack, which was using the in-game scripting language to infect the profiles of the players, and then it spread through the multiplayer, and in spreading, what it would do is it would cause everything on the server to blow up, and it would kill everybody and all that stuff, and it would say, hey, Bohemia, fix your game. So what it was doing was it was exploiting the fact that they had functions which could be recompiled in-game after they were called. So they were able to use that to act as a worm and infect the user profiles. In order to get rid of it, you had to delete the user profile to actually get rid of it. But if you got into another multiplayer server with someone in there, everybody in the server got infected.
That sounds along the lines of the Punkbuster trick that they did with just banning a bunch of random people.
Oh, I was in the developer community chats for that game when that was going on. It was chaos.
Yeah. Anyone, any other questions?
Hi, yes. I had to quickly run to your interview because I do the radio stuff, but I got to see most of your talk, and I'm really happy that you're able to do a talk not only about games, but something I feel important to me because I used to develop games as an independent contractor from 2005 to 2009. I left that because I work in the other hell now, which is gaming marketing. And one of the main reasons why I left is I used to do design, mainly level design, and working with the people who run the engines and art department and unite them together. And what frustrated me and had me left is compounding that we've dumbed down our gaming audience for being creative, essentially punishing them for exploring options and possibly making new gameplays, combined with the fact that the gaming industry tends to copy what's successful without understanding why things were successful, and thus they're also afraid, due to budgets, to do any sort of new change. My question is that, do you think this is something that will never be fixed, or do you think what would it take for companies to start going back on this? Is it the expansion of indie games? Would it be the death of the quote-unquote AAA market?
Honestly, it's hard to say. I've noticed the same as you, and one big thing is when a game is successful, everyone copies it. Like, look at Call of Duty. Like, 5 years ago, it was a great game to play, and now they've just re-released the same game with the same cutscenes and same graphics and everything a million times. So to that, I'm really not sure what it'll take for the gaming industry to realize this. I'm not so much the creative type or the marketing type, so that might actually be out of my depth at this point.
I personally think it's probably going to be a combination of factors, and I think they're going to slowly reach their vector point soon with the way tastes have been changing. But I think what would be really important is talks like what you've done. So thank you for having this talk. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello. This was an interesting talk. I've always wondered, like, what the heck is Punkbuster anyway? And now I know a little something about that. My question is, so it sounds like they are detecting bots by basically kind of checking to see if the game that's running is the same game that the developers wrote. Is there anything like heuristic detection, like if it notices somebody's shooting very accurately, then that's a possible bot?
So heuristic detection is typically server-sided. One of the games I make a bot for called Tibia right now, they do a lot of server-sided detection. And it's mostly based on, like, if this player walks to the same place 100 times today, well, it's probably a bot because people play much more randomly. They just go where they feel like going and stuff like this. So there's heuristics on that aspect. There's also heuristics for detecting combo bots. Like if the same group of 10 people all shoot the same rune within 200 milliseconds 10 times in a row, they're probably using a combo bot and stuff like this. Like you said, client side, they're doing basically it's like malware signatures. They just have a list of signatures they scan memory for, or they check, make sure all the DLLs have the same code in memory that they had on disk. World of Warcraft has a really interesting way of detecting client side as well, and it might include some heuristics. We don't really know. I haven't looked at Warden, but from what I've been told, no one really knows what it can do, because it sends down some compiled bytecode and some proprietary language to the client. This bytecode executes, and it has some question in there. It has some riddle, basically a function that returns some value. And when that value is returned, then the game sends it to the game server. So the only way to evade that is really to let it execute and hope you don't get caught, because if the game server doesn't get that response, then it knows you've just shut off Warden and it'll disconnect you or ban you or do whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting methods, and heuristic detection is definitely one. There's great papers on it. I wish I had the information with me right now, but yeah, it's definitely something that's used, but mostly server-sided.
A follow-up. What might you do if you were on the other side? What might you do to check for bots?
So I've thought about this a lot, and there's the signature detection, which is kind of broken. I would probably take that and I would chop it out to something more specific, first of all. Something that's not going to get you banned when you're in an IRC channel and someone pastes a signature. There's stuff like, instead of trying to detect bots, I think they should actually be prevented. So other than that, other than basic signature type detection, I would probably look at preventing bots, doing things like packing the game and loading it at runtime, or having it compiled in some fast but proprietary bytecode language that's run, stuff like this. Randomized packets and stuff like this, like the game server sends down some value between 0 and 255, and then that determines some random packet numbers that are used to identify the way it talks back and forth. I mean, it's a hindrance, it's security by obscurity, but when I'm making bots, it's, if I can just see this value being pushed to a function that I've determined to be create packet, it's really easy to know that this is packet number I need. Now, if it's got some function call and then it's doing a switch case and then I have to reverse engineer all this, it makes it extremely harder to make bots. So there's the security by obscurity, I think, is the best bet, and then beyond that, some signature-based detection and probably some memory checks and stuff like this. It's really hard to approach, though, which is why everyone who's done it has been pretty broken so far.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Much thanks to the gentleman before me. That was very similar to my question. What resources would you recommend for both sides of that?
Resources, it really depends on the game. Like, if you want to hack a specific game, there's always going to be a community for it. If you just want general resources, I would say learn reverse engineering, because it's not like, game hacking is not a specific thing. There's some specific things you need to know, like how to effectively hook DirectX and stuff like this. But beyond that, it's really just knowing how to reverse engineer a game binary and then how to hook into it. So a little bit of malware analysis, a little bit of malware dev, throw them together, and you've got game hacker's arsenal right there. Specific resources, like I said, it depends on the game. For the game Tibia, there's a site called tpforums.org, and it's just got every structure in this game outlined. And every time there's a game update, it's got different addresses for everything in the game. So it's really dependent on the community.
Okay, so then by the same token, as far as detecting that was going on the game developer side, sort of the methodologies that they would use, still nothing really particular for...
Well, see, that's an interesting question. This is another thing I've thought about. One huge thing, if you want to detect a bot, instead of having some catch-all software like Punkbuster, you should really find those specific communities that are making those bots and see what they're doing. Because if you know that this whole community that has all the main bot developers for your game all just nopes out this jump right here to do this certain bot function, like maybe it's a jump that jumps over printing a name if the player's on a different floor or something, and they nope it out, so now you can always see the name, something like that. If you know everyone's using that, well, you can interpolate the address of where that's happening in your code using some assembly magic, and now you see if that code is 90, 90, 90, 90, and you know there's a bot. So if you're looking at it on a game-specific level, you can really go look at what the communities are doing and detect that way.
Dig it. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, how's it going? Great talk. Oh man, it's so weird. I was curious, so a lot of the services nowadays, or the gaming services like, Blizzard, you tie all your crap to like one account, And so that means that kind of doing that testing is kind of really dangerous. So when it comes to, trying to figure out how to bot a game without getting spotted, what kind of methods do we do to actually test or, tread the water and making sure that a bot won't get banned, because or they make it expensive to do is what it seems like, or at least that's one mitigation.
So a lot of the mitigation techniques or the detection techniques, they have two parts to them. One is like the memory scanner verifying that the DLLs are what they say they are. And basically every cheat software out there, there's some forum that tells you exactly how to disable it, what code to nope out, what functions to hook, and what returns to give, and now the software is broken. So it's the signature detection that matters at that point. And if you're sitting here with your compiler open and you're prototyping a bot, they're not going to have your signature unless you're doing something very specific, but the chances are really nil. So if you're experimenting and you're keeping it to yourself, chances are you're not going to have a problem. When you start distributing that bot to your friends and stuff, and the game company sees a botting issue and they look specifically at those players, that's when there's going to be a problem. Or if you start selling it, well, now they're going to get their security team or their anti-botting team to reverse engineer your bot, tear it apart, and find the signatures as well.
So they're not going to like pinpoint you, and if all of a sudden you disable Warden or something, and
If you
they're not gonna
disable
flip out?
Warden, you will get pinpointed, like,
Yeah.
because like I said, it has that riddle thing from what I've heard. I've never played with it, but that's what I've heard, that once it sends the code down, server needs a response or it's going to kick you off.
Okay.
So it's once again, it's game specific. Like League of Legends, I played with it all day. I made Zoom hacks, I made camera hacks, I did all this fun stuff with League of Legends. I never got banned, but people use bot of Legends and they get banned all the time on League. So it's for the most part, for the majority of cases, that's not a problem until you start distributing the bot. But in cases like World of Warcraft and stuff, it might be a problem, and I'm not sure I'm the best person to comment on how to get around it.
Okay. Slightly unrelated, I was into console hacking and got all my friends banned off Xbox Live, and I wonder if you had any experience in doing the same kind of thing, or...
I have no experience in console hacking, but from what I understand, there's a lot of hardware hacking aspects to it.
Right.
And that's way out of my league at this point.
Oh,
So
well, it's a lot of fun. You
it's
should try
something
it.
I'd love to get into, so I'm definitely going to check it out when I have more time.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks.
What's stopping the game companies from using code signing to make sure you're not knopping anything out from their PE files?
So code signing would work for like DLLs that are being loaded, but most games are going to inject the DLL, do it all at runtime. And if your code is signed, it doesn't really matter, because if it's the signature's only checked right before the process forks. So if I'm modifying your code at runtime, then there's really nothing you can do. Some workarounds that games use is, of course, like ASLR, so it makes it hard to modify stuff at runtime, but it's still not impossible. For like someone who's just getting into game hacking, ASLR seems like a major setback, but once you've been doing it for a while, it's extremely easy, because it's not like you're an exploit on the stack trying to find your location. I mean, you can call get module handle, and now you have the base address, and you do some simple math. So it's not really an issue, because, I mean, some people do hex editing, but if you're serious, you're not hex editing, and if you're serious, and if you're not serious, you're probably not working with a game that has signed binaries, so.
And what about attaching to itself so that you can't attach to it with a debugger? And if you combine that with signed binaries, now you can't attach and modify memory short of having kernel access.
Well, you can still attach a debugger even if it's attached to itself. Like there's a plugin for Oli. I think Oli Advanced has the plugin for this where you check attach to process anyway, and now you can attach to it. Now there's anti-debugging measures as well, and that's just where you pull out your reverse engineer toolkit and you go at it like you're going at malware. If you've ever done malware analysis, you find out how it's detecting you, you take that out of the equation. Now, like you said, combined with signed binaries, maybe it becomes an issue because now you have to patch it every time you attach to the binary, but that's where custom tools come in. You write a script to do this automatically, or you write a plugin or whatever. If you're using IDA, use IDA Python, have a Python script do it as soon as you attach and stuff. So it's definitely a setback, but it doesn't make it impossible.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, as far as, as far as checking runtime binaries, developed a failed game about 5 years ago. Game just never took off. What we did though to check it was about every 30 seconds from the server, we would send down a fingerprint request and it would fingerprint a section of memory. If we got the wrong answer, you got logged out. No banning, but gone. For the commercialization of bots, to prevent getting sued, why not just move it, at least the business portion of it, offshore?
So some people do that. There's a lot of ways people make money. Some games, you'll develop a bot and then you'll have a team of friends, whatever, that just run this bot themselves. You don't sell the bot, but you have friends that run this on hundreds of accounts. Then you have hundreds of millions of gold and you sell the gold and that's how you make your money. Now, the game company can't really prove that you used gold getting a bot, so they can't really sue you. And selling gold is illegal in the eyes of the game company, but in the eyes of the law, it's not. There's nothing that they can say is intellectual property theft with selling gold where they can with developing a bot. So that's one way people do it. Some people do sell bots, like you said, move it offshore, sell it on Tor and use Bitcoins. You know, I've never seen anyone do that, but I'm sure someone's tried it. I'm not sure if it's easy then, because a lot of the audience buying bots is going to be a 13-year-old kid who just wants to play this game. And this 13-year-old kid doesn't want to fire up Tor, figure out how to buy Bitcoins, get his mom's approval to use the credit card to buy Bitcoins, and then buy a bot for this game. It's too much trouble. So that might be an issue. But like an example, like I said, with gold selling is the best way to do what you said, because gold in the game is almost like Bitcoins, right? So an example of that is there's one guy who uses my bot, and he has about 6 dedicated servers running something like 1,200 characters at a time. Now, across 70 servers, 1,200 characters is a lot. It's a little less than 20 characters on every server running, and he just collects immense amount of gold. And he makes more money selling that gold than I make selling the bot to him and everyone else. So that's probably the main way to do what you say there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got 2 questions. First one is kind of based on what he said. How prevalent is console hacking, and what's the vector to it? How do they?
So, I like he just said, super prevalent. I've seen it a lot.
It's a more hardware side or software side?
I think it's really hardware sided from what
Okay.
I've seen. Like the Xbox, it had a JTAG header on it, and then they could pull down the serial information and communicate with the debug interface, and somehow from there they got stuff onto it. Then there's like, you can get the hard drive from the Xbox, and you can find the files that
Okay.
store the information about games. And like there was a thing, this is the one console hacking thing I did do, is like the save file for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Sorry. The name that you had in game, which was supposed to be your gamer tag, was also stored in their save file for some reason. So you could modify that, and you could change the color of it and stuff by just
Okay.
modifying it with a hex editor in place, and then you could put it back on your hard drive, load it in the Xbox, and now you have whatever name you want with whatever fancy characters and colors you want. So I think there's a lot of different venues to it, but I mean, I've seen it everywhere. I mean, there's not a first-person shooter on the console that doesn't have God mode servers you can log on if you have a JTAG'd Xbox.
Other quick question. I hear guys talking about they read the source code. Where do they get the source code from for games?
So it depends. Like, I think, I can't remember the game. I think it might have been DayZ that just had a huge leak. All their source code was leaked.
Oh, okay.
Some other people may, I've seen people go as far as pulling it out in IDA and decompiling it and then fixing out variable names themselves and making it compilable code. Some games that are written in stuff like Flash, you can decompile the Flash to near compilable code already. So there's been instances of people decompiling a game that's in Flash, basically, writing the scripts to make the changes to the code that they need to recompile it, and then just every time the game updates, they just decompile it, put it as a branch in a repository, do a merge with their bot, recompile the flash, and then redirect it. Now you have a full bot based on their code base with no reverse engineering magic anywhere.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
When can you call something a bot? Let's say I have a plugin for World of Warcraft, which helps me, let's say, play better, right? And it uses the API, which other people use to build plugins, and technically it's legal. I never released it, but let's say I'm just better because of it. Or two examples. Once I modified my mouse to, I combined it with a blinking circuit. So it turned into a auto-clicking mouse, and all semi-automatic weapons in games, they became automatic. Nobody noticed, but in one game, I just put a little dot on my screen in the middle to shoot guns with no crosshairs, and I got banned pretty fast. Who decides what is a hack, what is a bot, and what is not?
Okay, so I have 2 minutes, so I'm going to answer this really quick and then take the guy behind you. But in that instance where you said it was turning semi-automatic weapons into automatic, it was probably heuristics, like one guy asked about earlier, where the server saw at a set interval you were hitting this button every single time and you were getting kill shots every single time. Some heuristic probably said he's using some bot and bans you. Now, as to who says it's a bot, it's dependent on the game company. They decide what they call a cheat, and their detection is really the be-all, end-all. So there have been lots of instances of people not using bots and getting detected, not due to bugs, but just playing really well or really consistently. So it's really dependent on the game.
I see. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just about someone else asked about how to get rid or what to do against bots. One thing I know Blizzard does is if it detects a new bot, is not ban it, but wait until the guy finishes it and starts selling it, and then ban the other people who bought it to get the reputation of that guy down, so nobody buys it anymore from him, so he stops developing. I found it an interesting idea.
Yeah, I would say that's interesting too. It's kind of a dirty way of doing it, but when people are messing up your game, I guess playing dirty is allowed. Okay, well, I am out of time, so thank you guys. Thanks for the wonderful questions. It's getting late, so after the next talk, go to the bar, get drunk, and then come up and watch Algorithm and eat vegan popcorn.
Here we are. Thank you very much. All right, as I was saying, I hope energy levels are high. It's going to be a great talk, great evening. Stay up late tonight. What do you got to do? Work on Monday? Forget about that. All day today, all night tonight, all day tomorrow. Party on. So welcome to the Getting Into Late Evening talk. I just want to mention a couple quick announcements. One is please consider taking your garbage with you. I know it comes in and it's not garbage, and then when it's time to go out, it is garbage, and please deposit it in the back. The hotel appreciates that, and it gets us happy with the hotel, and we like a happy hotel. Also, if you haven't noticed already or haven't heard about this already, the U track for the 4th unscheduled track, the sign-up sheet is available. It's right there right now for Sunday. So if you'd like to sign up, maybe you had a lightning talk that was a little more extensive. I don't think we're going to have a projector still, but maybe you had a lightning talk and you wanted to expand that. The U track is open tomorrow. And the other thing I want to mention is we do have vegan popcorn at the 1 a.m. showing of the Algorithms movie in the next the next room. So that'll be fun. Okay, here we go. The Sex Geek as Culture Hacker with Kirsten Stubbs, Dr. Stubbs.
All right, hi everybody. So if you're in this room, I hope you like sex. If you don't, that's okay. That's totally cool, but this may not be the talk for you. So and that's okay. I always like to say, if at any point you need to get up, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to go get a drink, whatever, you don't need my permission, we're all adults, just go do what you gotta do, that's fine. So let's get it rolling. A little bit about me. So I'm Kristen. I identify as queer and more specifically pansexual, which means I am potentially attracted to humans, kind of regardless of their gender presentation or their physical makeup, like it doesn't matter. That's just how I identify. My preferred pronouns are she and her, but I'm not particularly strongly gendered. You're like, hey lady, and I'm like, oh yeah, me? So yeah, gender with me is really kind of complicated, and we can talk more about that later if you like. My background, I have a PhD in robotics from Carnegie Mellon University. Yeah, I appreciate that. I live in Boston now, and so everybody's like, hey, you know so-and-so from MIT? And I'm like, no, sorry. Yay, CMU. So my work at Carnegie Mellon was largely in human-robot interaction and in educational robotics. But these days, I do things that are a little bit different than that. So getting into what we're talking about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is a geek? A little bit, talk about that. What it means if we're talking about a sex geek. What is this culture that we would like to hack through being sex geeks? And then I'm going to introduce you guys to a few folks who are out there doing really awesome sex positive work. And finally, the sort of broader context. If you start doing kind of public culture hacking in this way, what happens? And I'm going to share some personal stories, and it should be fun. So here we go. I love this quote from Wil Wheaton. If you haven't seen Wil Wheaton's address to the newborn girl about what it means to be a nerd, like, oh, go watch it. It's fantastic. So being a nerd is not about what you love, it's about how you love it. And so, conventionally say, if you're a video game geek, and I do like video games myself, if you say you're a video game geek, people will probably assume you like to play games. Pretty reasonable assumption. But, once we say geek, then we get into this whole other world. You watch podcasts, you're on Twitch, you're going to cons, maybe you're making costumes, you're talking to people, you're writing about the games that you like and the games you don't like. There's this whole ecosystem around it. Now, what happens, however, if I stand up here and tell you I'm a sex geek? Your first likely assumption is that I like to have sex, and you would be correct. I do like to have sex, as a matter of fact. And as a geek, then, what does that do? Well, it opens up this whole other world. I listen to podcasts, and I write about sex, and I talk to other people about sex, and I go to cons, and I make toys, and I also watch videos, like you do. And so what's interesting, and we'll talk, so just by standing up here and saying that, it's kind of a political act, and it has significant consequences in our society, and I will talk more about that later. This is gonna be fun. Okay. So what is this culture that we would like to hack and mess around with? Generally, mainstream culture in the US can be described as sex negative. What does that mean? It means that sex is generally seen as kind of a shameful thing. To some people, it can be a very sinful thing in certain contexts. So you get all this really nasty stuff. You get slut shaming. You have this double standard where, say, women who have a lot of sex are sluts, but men who have a lot of sex are like studs. We get rape culture, which kind of glorifies sexual violence, particularly against women. Really crappy sex ed. I don't know about you guys. I grew up in the Midwest, and you, of course, these days you get a lot of abstinence-only programs, which studies indicate. Turns out telling teenagers not to have sex, not super effective. Yeah. And you get, so Al Vernaccio has a great TED Talk on finding a new metaphor for sex, and I'll link to that in the post with all my slides. And he's like, right now we use this baseball metaphor. So, right, sex is kind of this game, like you're trying to score, and you've got to get to bases. There's like this order, and it sets up this kind of weird oppositional dynamic between the people involved, like somebody wants it and somebody else is going to have to give it up or whatever. This is a bunch of crap. So sex negative culture, no. What do we want? We want sex positive culture. Aha. What does that entail? I mean, at a basic level, it's just celebrating the joy of sex, that sex is a normal, natural thing many people enjoy, some people don't. Aces, that's okay, that's totally cool. That we're promoting consent culture, where we want people to be enthusiastically consenting, right? So you've got adults who are informed about what they're doing, they've talked about what they're gonna do, and they're gonna have fun doing it. Al uses the pizza metaphor. So it's like, why don't we talk about sex like you're getting together with somebody and you're gonna order a pizza? So you talk about it like, hey, do you feel like pizza? And maybe the other person does, great. And if they don't, oh, that's okay. I just had pizza. Maybe I want tacos. Okay, that's cool. Not a big deal. Maybe you'll do Mexican, maybe you'll do something else. But if you decide you're gonna have a pizza then begins the negotiating phase, right? It's like, well, okay, what toppings do you want? What toppings do I want? Are we gonna do like half and half? And it's this collaborative negotiation where you're figuring out what you're gonna do and you're both gonna be hopefully excited and enjoy the result. And then of course, we need better, honest, age-appropriate sex education that actually conveys useful information to young people, regardless of, say, their gender or their orientation. Those are the types of things that we're excited about and we want to promote through our sex geekery. So there's a couple of groups of people that I'm gonna talk about who have done work trying to contribute to this culture change. Some folks geek out by sharing experiences and ideas, and other folks make things. And these are both, again, these are really our geeky tendencies that we can leverage for the good in this situation, for sure. So here's a few folks that I wanted to introduce you to, and I thought this was really hard to kind of narrow down because there's a huge range of awesome people doing really awesome work, but I tried to narrow it down and I tried to pick people who I thought maybe you hadn't heard of before. Although the person who I'll start out with that probably many of you had heard of is the amazing Violet Blue. So she is a fantastic tech reporter, a journalist, author, educator, advocate, has done a lot of great work on the NIM Wars, NIM rights. The first book by Violet Blue that I ever got was The Smart Girl's Guide to Porn. Not because I wasn't already watching porn, which I was, but because I wanted to watch better porn, and that was really awesome. One of her most recent books now is The Smart Girl's Guide to Privacy, which I think is really awesome and also kind of says a lot about where our society has gone like in the last 10 years. So she's doing great work. Ms. Maggie Mayhem. So if you saw Johannes's film last night, you saw a cameo by Maggie Mayhem as one of the nerds, which was great. Maggie Mayhem is a sex worker out of San Francisco, and she's incredibly intelligent and articulate, and really can give you a perspective on what life as a sex worker is like. She recently was in Occupied, which won the Feminist Porn Release of the Year for 2014, which is amazing. I haven't seen it yet, but it involves an encounter between an Occupy protester and a cop, which is Rule 34, all the things, which is great. Feminist porn, I love feminist porn. So that's really awesome. If you only read one thing by her, go check out talesofkink.com, which is the story of how she got into sex work, which she explains is basically committing social suicide. And it's a really powerful piece and worth a look if you're interested in that niche of sex geekery. Cliff Provocracy is a geek out of the Boston area, so a friend of mine. And Cliff speaks very articulately about feminism and BDSM, which is really cool. Some of Cliff's work that's really fun, Cliff does a series called Cosmocking, where they take the latest issue of Cosmopolitan and go through the sex tips and basically call out the BS of like, okay, no, that is ludicrous. Aren't you gonna like get consent before you try that thing on that person that you haven't done before? Yeah, really hilarious, kind of depressing, but good stuff. Cliff has also written the Geek Social Fallacies of Sex. So some of you may have seen the Geek Social Fallacies, which is a great piece. Cliff has the social fallacies of sex, which are things like, we can decide before we have sex that our emotions are not going to enter into it and nothing will change. Yeah, no, does not work that way. So some really insightful thinking, particularly into the sexuality of geeks. And that's just great reading. The last person before I introduced, I don't know if anybody recognizes this. This was the first sex toy that I ever made. I took a class at Artisans Asylum, which is my local makerspace in Somerville. And I was friends with the instructor, and I said, you realize I want to exit your class with the maximum number of fuckable objects. And he was like, okay. So everybody else, first project, made a candle. I made a butt plug. Final projects were a range of nice sculptures, and I made a copy of my favorite dildo, and I put a little tiny TARDIS inside it. And this toy I actually dedicated to Kate Bornstein. So Kate Bornstein is a geek of all geeks. She's got like Neil Gaiman's sleeve on one side. She's got Doctor Who, Battlestar Galactica tattoos. Really geeks out about gender, being transgender, the trans experience. Does a lot of awesome work supporting what she calls like gender outlaws, young LGBTQ people. Is amazing. So if you want to kind of geek out about gender, like they've done amazing writing. I love her business card. I am so honored to like have gotten one of her business cards. It's a get out of hell free card. And she hands it to you and you read it and it's basically like, if you're ever sent to hell, not for being mean to somebody, but just for being yourself or loving who you love, if that gets you sent to hell, Auntie Kate will serve that time for you. It's totally awesome. So for a whole community of young queer and trans, especially trans and genderqueer folk, like if you need an auntie, that is how we tweet to her. Auntie Kate, I love you. You know, totally. Amazing person, great writing. Definitely check her out. And so what about people who make things? Because we're definitely a conference of geeks here who like to make things. This is my friend, Dr. Extreme. Dr. Extreme has a PhD in physics and basically takes applied physics to sex toys, and it is totally amazing and just fantastic. So the toy on the left there, that was his first one, the X1 Orgasmatron. And basically he was like, we're gonna use the principle of impedance matching. So the deal is, right, most vibrators have a little tiny like weight that you're spinning around, right? Now, it turns out that if you're trying to move something like, say, the clitoris, which while externally can be fairly small, internally there is a lot of tissue there. It's like you're trying to hit a bowling ball with a badminton racket. Why would you do that? So his X1 has basically this huge mass inside it. So you pick up the toy, and like if you've ever used, say, a Hitachi magic wand, like you put that on your palm, and like, yeah, there's a lot of buzzing going on. That's nice. You pick up the X1 and turn it on, and like your entire arm is shaking. I'm like, physics. This is the power of the science. He's great. The middle thing there, that is the Hack-Off. That is his open hardware project to make it really easy to control a vibrator from an Arduino. Yeah, it's great. And then the last one, the purple toy, this is his new one he's crowdfunding now, the Ambrosia. He calls this the bionic dildo because he's basically got a pressure sensor in the shaft, so it can sense when it's being like stroked or sucked on. So rhythmic motion then gets translated to the little bullet vibe. So you could actually like have a strap on and get some sensory response, like kind of relating to what's happening to your strap on. Yeah, it's awesome, right? And it's all physics. He's great. he gave a demo of this at the last Ars Electronica, and he's like got all the equations, and it's just like, whoa. I personally was not great at physics, so I admire the folks who are and do fun stuff like this. Some of you may have seen Micah Elizabeth Scott's piece, Hacking My Vagina. So she really wanted to build a hands-free vibrator controller and happened to have a sonar sensor around, and like has documented on her blog like all the things she did. And the thing about this is you've got her sensor here, and then you end up with this kind of crazy like haptic field around it. So like as you sort of get your hand closer to the sensor, then the vibrator starts activating and you can kind of play around with the region of activation. So it's great. She's like, it's hands-free. Again, just another really cool project, fun stuff. So Tina Gong is actually local here in New York. I just found out about her work. So this by the way, is Tina's like self-portrait on the left. And on the right, this is Happy. Happy is the most adorable cartoon vulva I have ever seen. Hands down. Totally amazing. So Tina wrote an app called Happy Playtime that is designed to be an educational app for women, cisgendered women, to talk about masturbation. Because again, we live in a society where I feel like we have kind of a lot of cultural references and jokes about guys jacking off, but women, like, not so much, even though it's totally a thing that women and a lot of people like to do. And so she's built this educational app to try and kind of provide ideas and feedback and information to women, and submitted it to Apple, and it was denied. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, it's really sucky. And so she is reworking it as a web app. So I will be anxiously following the progress. So it's like whether you work with software or hardware, like there are totally geeky, fun, awesome, sex positive things you can be doing. So as for myself, I got started because I was really interested in inspiring people to not just sort of use the stuff that you can get off the shelf, but really start to make and hack and find ways to make your own sex life better, to have the kinds of experiences you want to have. My goal is to make a sex toy or piece of BDSM equipment using every workshop at my makerspace. So here we've got a prototype. So a friend of mine came up with the idea of a movable type paddle. Some folks may be aware you can buy implements that have a word printed on them. You can print that word on other people, but why would you want to print the same word over and over? I mean, bitch is great, but like after a while, it gets old. So that is, that prototype totally does not work, but you know, oh yeah, it's prototype. Totally, no, not good. I have played around with using Sugru as a way to help like fix and make some of that's my favorite bunny, make that a little more stable. We have lamp glass working. So what you're seeing there on the bottom is a Barbie scale glass dildo. We didn't have torches big enough for like human scale glass toys. And I was like, what am I gonna do? And then I'm like, Barbie. What does Barbie really need? She really needs a glass strap on, as it turns out. And we have a screen printing shop, so I made a cool transpositive shirt. So it's been a really interesting journey. The toy that I have made that has definitely gotten me the most attention is called the Hammer. So, some people may have seen it before. So the Hammer, the first version of the Hammer was one solid piece and had some sensing, and the idea was going to be that you could squeeze your PC muscles and light it up, so like a test your strength game. It would, and you can see the video. It would work, but the trick was the sensor was not really, it was like, you get cheap or easy or it works, like pick two of the three. I got cheap and easy and it didn't really work. But so it goes. So when those prototypes died, I was about to go to Burning Man. I was like, I can't go to Burning Man without a glowing sex toy. So the next edition of the Hammer was born. And if the demo gods smile upon me, will they? Yeah. Let's see if I can swing this around. All right. So now, what I love is at this point in the talk, it does not matter what I say. That's okay with me. It gives me a couple minutes to collect my thoughts while we just enjoy the glowing rainbow penis. I actually believe, I would like to declare, by the way, that all dick waving contests are now over. I win. And we can now just move on as a society. This is it. So this is 25 of Adafruit's NeoPixels. I love Adafruit. I love Adafruit. So this is Adafruit NeoPixels like you have never seen them before. Silicone, it turns out, is really great for the dispersion of the light. And this is hooked up to a custom little shield in Arduino that I happen to have around. And Jimmy Rogers of the hardware hacking area downstairs helped to do a lot of these electronics. And shout out to him, he's amazing. So yeah, this was kind of what I started to do. And yeah, it's been a blast. This was named Crack.com's #1 geekiest sex toy of all time, and I was like, wow, after my PhD, that's a pretty good accomplishment right there. I'll take that, sure. So then my journey was like, okay, make hilarious sex toy, and then, well, I'd like to get it manufactured. Okay, well, I'm gonna need a company. Okay, so I'm gonna need a fundraise because hardware is expensive, right? Hardware sucks. It'd be great if I could crowdfund. And this was a couple years ago when Indiegogo and Kickstarter were kicking off sex toys. You could not use Kickstarter and Indiegogo and most extant platforms to do crowdfunding. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to build a crowdfunding platform. All right, I'm gonna go build a crowdfunding platform. All right, so I'm gonna need some developers. I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do about a code base. Oh, hey, there's this open source project that I'm gonna have to start futzing with, and there I was. And there I was with my yak. And all right, I'm sorry guys, I'm gonna have to sneak back over here to get my slides. You can look at my penis more later if you like afterwards. That's okay. So, and I actually realized as I got going, I kind of fell in love with the yak I was shaving. Because I realized, so it wasn't just about me making one toy. I mean, that's cool, that's fun. And I appreciate how many people get a kick out of this and laugh, because you know what? Sex can just be really hilarious and silly and fun. That's okay. Yay, thanks. A little applause there. Yeah, sex can just be silly and that's fine. So suppose I got that manufactured. Well, there might be a few folks who would be interested in getting one, that's cool. But not everyone wants a glowing penis. I don't really know why not. But for some reason, this is not, in fact, everyone's bag. And some people may not be able to afford it. So there's a limit to how much cool goodness I can do that way. But if I spend my time and energy building tools to help provide resources to all the other cool sex geeks who are out educating folks, making films, making toys, doing theater productions, we start to reach a lot more people. And hopefully some of those people will then turn around, start doing fun sex geek stuff, and they start reaching even more people. So my startup now, over the course of a couple years, I'm now reworking it as a nonprofit. And so we are gonna start providing a grant-making platform and resources to folks who are doing awesome sex-positive work. If that's something you're interested in contributing to, time, money, whatever, let me know. We're still in the pretty early stages. I made this decision just a couple months ago. If anybody's interested later, we can talk details. It makes some of the behind-the-scenes crowdfunding stuff much easier to do it this way, needless to say. So that's been the journey that I've taken. And so the responses that I've gotten have been really interesting. And I thought it would be fun to talk about. But first I want to do a quick privilege check. So I need to acknowledge that I have a lot of privilege to be able to do what I do. The fact that I can use the name that's on my driver's license and stand up in public and say I like sex, I recognize a lot of other people cannot do that. I have an amazing husband. I'm white. I'm from an upper middle class background. I'm well educated. I am so thankful for the life that I have. I recognize not everyone can do what I do, but I will try to use the privilege that I have to make the biggest impact in the world that I can, which I think is something a lot of people here also really strive for. Thanks. So that's important to me, but I want to give a shout out because I know not everybody can stand up here and be like, oh yeah, I love sex. Let me tell you about it. So here we are. So in deciding to stand up and say, well, yes, I like to have sex, let me tell you about it, this has had consequences at a number of levels. For me, the biggest one was I did a lot of work in robotics education. I will never work with K-12 students again. You laugh, but it's like I had that was a career choice that I had to make. I actually enjoyed like working with kids. It was cool. I met a lot of really cool kids. But I will never do that work again because of the sex negative society that we live in. And that was a choice I had to consciously make. And so that was a big deal for me. It was hard to like look and be like, oh, I was having this nice career over here. But then it was like, well, I really like sex. and I wanted to run in that direction instead. The other thing I have run into, the financial system, not very sex positive, it turns out. I am fortunate. So the first bank account that I started for my company, 30 minutes. It lasted 30 minutes. I filled out the application. They were very nice. I remained, relatively vague about what I did. And then they looked at my email address, went to that domain, called me up and were like, is this your website? I was like, yeah. And I tried to come back in and talk about it. They didn't want to hear about it. It's like, okay. Yep, it still sucked. Like I wasn't totally surprised, but it still kind of sucked. So things like trying to deal with payment processing, trying to find banks that will work with me, that kind of thing. It's even worse for sex workers. Tina Horn, also local to New York, just had a great article in Vice about the impact of the financial system on sex workers. It's disgusting. It's really disgusting. And I'll post a link to that. So that's kind of another of these bigger societal things I have had to deal with. So now at this point, before we go further along this line, I wanted to do a thought exercise. I thought this would be fun, get you guys psyched up again. I know it's really hard to top a glowing penis, but I just have to kind of keep going. So here we go. So I'm going to show you a flowchart. And when I am done presenting the flowchart, I want you, if you can, to kind of capture what your immediate reaction is. Try to make note of what you're thinking, like when we're all through. We'll see how this goes. All right. Box 1. Have I already told you I would have sex with you before, during, or after this con? I will tell you the answer, no. So I will not have sex with you before, during, or after this con. This is a thing that I really struggled with because given some of the experiences I've had, I thought it would not hurt to be very clear. And so when you see this flowchart, if you notice what you are thinking, if your response is, what a bitch, she doesn't even know me, of course she would want to fuck me. That tells me something about boundaries and your sense of boundaries. I actually do get to stand up here and make declarations like this because I am a human being, and hopefully you will be decent and respect them. We'll see how that goes. Oh, thanks. Yeah. And so the big thing I think I have learned in trying to do the sex positive geek thing is that boundaries get to be really interesting and kind of an issue. So if I'm over here as sex geek culture hacker and I have some boundaries about kind of what I consider normal, respectable behavior, and I recognize other people are out there, they also have boundaries. Once you start talking in public about sex, some people can deal well with those boundaries and some people just kind of plow right through them. And I think part of that is because I'm talking about sex, and I think part of it is because I look the way I look, and I was raised as a woman, and that has made for some really interesting experiences. So we're gonna play a game of awesome or awkward. I'm gonna tell you about an experience that I had, and we're gonna see whether that was awesome or awkward. Oh, jumping the gun a little bit over here. Now wait. So here's the first one. These are some comments that I got when I posted the story of like the first time I had partnered penis and vagina sex. I'm really not fond of the term virgin. I think we have a whole nasty cult around virginity and what that means. That's a bunch of bullshit. So the first time I had partnered sex, I posted that story, and these are some of the comments I got. This was awesome, right? People were sharing their stories. They were acknowledging we had had this common experience, this kind of, how do you move from growing up in a really like sex negative environment to becoming sex positive and embracing your sexuality. That was awesome. This was great. These were great messages to receive. And here's one. So I run a Kinky Maker meetup event at my makerspace like every other month. It's kind of like Dorkbot, right? It's like people playing with electricity and leather and wood and other things for kinky and fun purposes. So I run this event, and during the event, I get a message from like J random guy I do not know, and he's like asking about the scheduling, and I'm like, yeah, you know, we're still going, come on by. This was awesome. Like, yeah, I'm running an event. Someone's interested in coming to my event. Great. Awesome. The next message I get from him is this, which ends up being kind of a really like weird like proposition. This is a dude I have never met. I have no idea who this guy is, but he decided he would see if I was interested in doing some toy testing. And it's like, no, that's kind of awkward. And then the next message, and I see you're married, so feel free to relay that message to any women who might be there, as awful as that sounds, lol. If you're telling me that it's awful, that's your clue right there. This was horrible. I was like, wow. I have these moments where it's like, oh, humans, I cannot believe you sometimes. So yeah, this was horribly awkward, and it gets into that sort of objectification and some sort of boundary issues there. So that was not cool. This is interesting. So I do wear my penis for demonstration purposes at conferences. This does happen. And every so often, someone will just come up to me and just touch my penis. Not cool. Don't touch other people's junk without asking. I feel that's a pretty reasonable rule across the board, regardless of whether it's, you know, made of silicone or not. Like, you know, and I actually had a guy like say, oh, I just can't help myself. And I'm like, really? Really? No. And I have also had people that I did not know just come up and touch me. And it can often be like older guys maybe. And, you know, there's one thing for like offering me a handshake or like offering me a high five or like, do you want a hug? I'm cool, you know, offer, that's cool. But like, just like touching me, like, hey, you're like gonna come over here and get in my space and just touch me. It's weird. And it's awkward. And I've realized in part that's not just because it's the one dude, it's because over his shoulder, he can't see. There's the ghosts of all these other dudes who have done it, and like the thousands of years where men treated people like me like property, where we couldn't actually control our own bodies and who got to touch us and who didn't get to touch us. So yeah, that is really awkward. Kind of my pro tip there is like, don't touch people without asking, especially not their junk, but just don't touch them in general. And like offer some contact, but if you don't know them, like just play it safe. Don't be awkward. Oh, yeah, like seriously. And I've heard of that happening at this conference. So like, yeah, be aware. This is another thing. Okay. So I will be up at a conference talking about sex like I do. And you know, sometimes I get feedback. Great talk, that's cool. I get people asking about my toys or some of the experiences I've talked about. That is awesome. I love like talking with people about my work. Then sometimes, this is scumbag Septagon again, I get things like, you're hot. And I thought for a while, like, why is that so awkward? And I think part of it is because it feels very objectifying. It feels very disrespectful. Like, I know you're really excited to tell me about what your groin is thinking. I'm not really interested. Like, that's not actually what I'm talking about. The other thing is, you'll notice that these conferences are often like, they're basically public, right? If you can afford to get in, if you can get a ticket, like anybody who can afford a ticket can basically go. So then as far as I'm concerned, I might as well be standing in the grocery store looking at produce, and you're coming up to me and being like, you're hot. It's like, what? Like, I don't have a relationship with you. I don't know you. Like, this isn't very helpful. Again, it feels like this weird kind of boundary violation of just like, you know, normal, respectful people kind of engaging with each other in normal, respectful ways. So that has been some of the things that I have seen. So if we're talking about, you know, hacking this culture to make it sex positive, right? It's about sharing experiences and ideas, making things, getting people excited, But also there's this issue of boundaries and respecting them. Because if you decide that you want to start doing this kind of culture hacking and doing sex positive work sort of in a public way, or at least a way that your friends can see or whatever, be aware that you're gonna need to set boundaries and you're gonna need to enforce them, because there are gonna be folks who are just like whatever, and try to plow right through. If this is not your bag, you're not necessarily yourself interested in going out and doing this kind of public work, which is totally fine. This is not for everybody. But if you're interested in learning from these folks or asking them questions, being aware of those boundaries and being respectful of them is a good thing. And it's good because that's part of the culture that we want to have. Like, that's part of the sex positive culture is looking for consent and respecting boundaries, and that's gonna be awesome. So real quick, I wanted to give a shout out to my husband, who's amazing, all of my friends who support me doing the work that I do, my lawyer, Davis of Sexquire, who's awesome for my startup. I work with Melina Williams. She's a BDSM educator based out of New York. She does my social media. The patron saint of this talk is Captain Awkward and the Awkward Army. If you haven't read Captain Awkward, like this, they really gave me the language to start thinking about boundaries and understanding sort of how people were relating to me, and that was invaluable. I also want to give a shout out to Cable Flame, who has given awesome sex talks at Hope in the past. When I was like, should I propose this talk or not? Cable Flame was super supportive and encouraging, and that was great. And of course, thanks to everybody at 2600, the staff and volunteers of Hope, for making this possible so I can come out here and share this and share my work with all of you. I really appreciate it. So I unfortunately, I don't have my watch up on me. As out of 11:45, the notes and slides from this talk will go live on my website at toymakerproject.com/hope-x. So there's tons of links, tons of references, everybody who I've talked about, all the concepts I've talked about, there's links to all those things. And yeah, so thank you guys very much for listening. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward now to hearing some of your questions and comments.
Got the mic on? Great. Hi there, thanks. Fantastic talk.
Thank you.
I've had an interest in this for some time, but kind of aside from being a maker, kind of day job, the work that I've been doing, I've kind of focused in the sort of fetish community where it's been quite well accepted. How did you make the kind of the crossover to the more sort of mainstream audience?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So I think for me, part of it is, well, when I'm thinking about projects, part of it, it just kind of comes from your own interests, right? And so for me, especially starting with like dildos, like that's just something I'm really interested in. Like that was like a toy that I could make that I was interested in, and it turns out, well, yeah, a lot of other people are interested in that too. I also, when I'm setting up events, try to be very inclusive in language and to let people know that it doesn't matter like what material you're interested in or what gender you are. Like I really try to be very open, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's not always easy because like, yeah, I agree. I feel like within kind of the fetish BDSM community, you get a lot of like DIY. And so I'm trying to make an effort to kind of reach out to folks beyond that, and, with varying degrees of success. But part of it, I think, is kind of language and how you're framing it. And part of it is sort of what are you making, and depending on what it is, that'll have a different community of folks who are interested.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much for this talk. It's a perspective that we don't really get enough. So thanks again.
Thank you.
My question for you, I feel like this year in particular, I've been hearing about rape culture through my Facebook and stuff. And as a white guy, I was kind of blown away that it's a thing that half the population knows is real and the other half is denying it. And I'm like, am I part of the problem? So my question in particular is, in the geek community in particular, what's going on with us?
Okay, well, I appreciate that question. That is probably outside of the scope of what I can talk to.
Well, just your experience.
Well, so I'm honestly not entirely sure. I mean, part of it is, right, there are jackasses in the world, but there are jackasses everywhere, right? There are jackasses who are geeks, there are jackasses who are not geeks, right? That's just kind of it. I think part of it is that, geeks have, I feel like we have a lot of, I think part of, okay, so if you check out, say, the geek social fallacies, I think that's related, because there's a lot of things about not excluding people, not wanting to create drama, we don't want to rock the boat, we want everyone to get along, so maybe it's harder to call out problematic behavior. Yeah, that's a big question. There is a really good article that I linked to here called The Gentleman's Guide to Rape Culture, and I think that might have some good pointers for you on just things to be aware of. But yeah, no, I mean, I've run into friends, I'm friends with a guy who's like a bodybuilder, right? This guy is like massive, and he's like, my friend and I, another guy friend and I, were like talking, and we're like, oh, we realized that if a woman was riding the elevator with us, she might like notice that there are these big guys with her. And then I was like, yeah, it's kind of a thing you notice. So yeah, I think it's, thank you for standing up and asking that. I really appreciate that you want to be more aware. And yeah, I'm not qualified to answer all the things, but maybe check out The Gentleman's Guide to Rape Culture, and that will give you some clues.
Thanks.
Hi, this is not so much a question as just, I was thinking about your awkward versus awesome slides, and they were wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
But I was thinking back to an article, and unfortunately I couldn't find it. All of my devices have died.
Oh, my condolences.
But it was actually about just the same sort of situation, but just standing on a train platform with a stranger, and men forcing conversations with you that you don't really want to have, and you have to fight this game of, do I be polite? How do I walk away from this? I would like to not talk to you for 10 minutes without being really standoffish and rude, but it comes down to that awkward thing, and it's a really great article. If I can find it, I will tweet it to you. But
oh, that would be great.
yeah, no, it was excellent, and just about
was that Captain Awkward? I feel like Captain Awkward might have written something about that.
I didn't catch the name. It was something.
But yeah, no, absolutely right. It's this weird thing of like, how do I enforce my boundaries? And we have a lot of societal crap around women sort of having boundaries and acknowledging where they are. Like not just women, but like again, I was raised in the Midwest in a really conservative family. I was not taught to tell people to shut the fuck up, even when that's really what they need to do.
Yeah, I was too, and I still have those boundaries.
I know, right? Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
Thank
but
you.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a question, particularly it's like with the makerspace. I don't know, it's like well, I guess this is an awkward moment for me. It's like I'm kind of curious, it's like how did you broach the question, or it's like bring up the subject of making toys at it's like makerspace, because it's like one of the reasons it's like I got into electronics was to make toys, and it's like I would keep on going to makerspaces and people would go over and say, oh well, what project do you want to work on? And I'd go and say I didn't have an idea, or oh, I'd like to learn about motors. It's like
That's a great question. So it will definitely depend on probably the flavor of the space and the people who you're working with. I have generally found, I have been very upfront about what I do. And so at least at my hackerspace, kind of what you work on in your own space is pretty much your own business. There's not really too much that they're gonna have to say there, really. But yeah, so people would be like, what are you working on? I'm like, making a dildo. And then you kind of gauge their reaction. Like some people will be like, oh, hey, yeah. And other people are like, they give you the kind of awkward look, and you're like, oh, no worries. And you go somewhere else. You're like, oh, So I don't try to force what I'm doing on people, but if people ask me what I do, I tell them what I do. And now I have the reputation as like the woman at the makerspace who makes sex toys, and I get random people coming up and like, hey, it's like, hey, I hear you make toys. And it's like, yeah, come on over. You want to see my prototypes? Are you interested in something? Can I tell you about silicone? Like, so it kind of depends on your comfort level, their comfort level. Like, I don't try to force what I do on people, but I'm honest. For me, I have learned I am happiest, if you can't tell, when I'm very open and honest about what I do. And so that's worked okay for me. Your mileage may vary. It got a little more complicated when I wanted to start the meetup group, because I wanted to make sure that the Hackerspace administration was like cool with that, and how do we kind of sort that out? But they were pretty cool, and I at least so far, at least at Artisans Asylum in Boston, it's a really pretty open-minded group of people. And like once word got around that this is what I was doing, then I started people started coming out of the woodwork and be like, oh, well, I built a prototype for that. I'm like, oh, cool, So, just see what you're comfortable with. But people may surprise you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi. So I have two shout outs and also a question. I wanted to shout out St. James Infirmary, which is an organization in San Francisco that provides free healthcare services to sex workers. And they're really amazing. And there's probably similar organizations all over, but I've done a little bit of work for them, and they're good people. The other thing I want to shout out is a conference called Ars Electronica, which is organized by somebody in this room.
Johannes
here. And it happens it's a sex geek conference, and it happens every year, approximately every year in San Francisco. And it's really worth checking out if you have the time. My question for you is, what do you think are some age-appropriate ways to teach consent culture? Because it seems like there are weird things that we put up with, and like the stereotype of the child running around on the playground and pulling the hair of the person that they have a crush on, and that's really fucked up culture to teach, actually, right?
What do you do with someone you harass them?
Right.
That is a really great question. It is unfortunately beyond the scope of my work. There is a blogger, and I will see if I can tweet this later and add it to the slides. There is the sex positive parent. So there are folks who are doing work exactly in this area, although I can't speak to it myself. But that's absolutely a thing. It's teaching people you don't run up and touch other people's junk. You don't run up and just pull people's hair. Not cool.
Right. I mean, it seems like this would be more effective if we could teach this from a young age.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You gotta, really, you gotta get them while they're young. Yeah, you wanna teach them smart, good habits at an age-appropriate level, so that then later, you're telling this consistent story about consent and what consent means and how to have healthy relationships. Absolutely. So sex-positive parent is one, and I'll work on getting links to that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great question.
My question is would be a good follow-up to that. It's a little political in terms of, we went to the same university, and I was really upset to find that university on the list of schools that dealt very poorly with sexual violence, particularly towards women. And so I'm sad to hear that you're kind of out of helping with the education stuff, because I think there's a lot to be done above the K through 12 level at the college level. And I'm wondering if you have any opinions on how we can help change that culture as, people who have already graduated and left, and we can't, be part of a protest on campus, and we can't really force them to change.
That's a really good question. That's big. Let me think. So part of things you might be able to do would be if you can connect with, more campuses have sex weeks, things like that. If you can find kind of student groups, you might be able to connect with helping them bring in speakers, because there are a huge number of amazing sexuality educators, for one thing, who are really passionate about, do a lot of speaking with college students, really passionate about this kind of work. Again, I'm sorry, this is not totally my purview, but I appreciate it. It's definitely a problem. And I'll do some more digging to see if I can find specific people to maybe kind of point you to whose work might be more relevant. But it's a huge issue, and absolutely I appreciate that you're concerned, because it sucks. It's a big deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So during your talk, you mentioned
how difficult it was to muster financial, not even backing, just financial acceptance.
Yeah, like in just infrastructure.
Yeah,
just
just
basic.
somebody who was willing to
infrastructure.
hold your dollars until you needed them. For everybody who may have come out of this inspired to make, for example, the three-armed rotating dildo or whatever, right? And need those people who need somewhere to put their dollars. How did you solve that problem?
I don't have a great solution at the moment. If you're an individual, the Internet Archive has a credit union, and the Internet Archive is remarkably open-minded.
They're amazing. It's
Believe
true.
it or not. So if you're an individual, getting an account at the Internet Archive Credit Union is actually pretty cool. They're like, as long as you are not doing anything illegal, we don't care. If you're a business, it's a little more complicated, and that I don't have a great solution to at this point. So basically, the yaks too far are like the sex-positive financial institution and the sex-positive insurance pool for like event organizers. Like anybody out there, free idea, money to be made, huge community that needs that kind of service. So yeah, I'm still working on it. If that's a thing you're interested in, keep up with me. And as I like find solutions, I will be shouting them to the hills. Because one of the things my nonprofit will hopefully do is have a directory where we can be like, oh, you're looking for, the bank where you can park your money, or you need a lawyer, or you need, whatever, trying to make that more accessible so people starting companies can work with providers who are happy to work with them. Because it's not an easy thing. So thank
Kristen, you are doing great work.
Thank you very much. All right, I've got 2 minutes left, so I have time for another question.
So early in the talk, you talked about how you'd had to give up your K through 12. And I'm wondering have you given something like this talk in Europe or Japan or someplace where things are a little different, and did people react quizzically?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I have actually not had the opportunity to do the sex positive stuff outside the US. Like, I should look into that. Yeah, that would be really, I'm like, research, science needs to be done. Comparative reactions of audiences to the hammer in different regions of the world. So that is a great question, and I would love to find out the answer, absolutely.
I think the hammer seems very cool, and on a related note, there's a Kickstarter that started for, you've heard of it, the K-Goal, which is the Fitbit for Kegel exercises.
Yes, I'm super psyched.
I think you may have inspired something, I think.
I don't know. I don't know the people at Minna. So they're a company in San Francisco. Yes, the Kegel, and if you look back on my Twitter feed, it's in there somewhere. Yeah, it's a Kegel exercise trainer that actually gives feedback like to your smartphone, and you can do like an exercise training program. And I'm like, that's awesome because Kegel exercise is effing boring.
But they are selling it as, or at least it's packaged not as a toy at all. It's just like, this is for your health. Health is important. And I was looking at it, I was like, I'm betting Kickstarter isn't fond of toys, and that's why this is a health thing.
We'll see. These days, I know a couple of people that are running like sex toy campaigns and have not been taken down yet. So it could be. The other thing is sex toys are actually in a different category than porn. I'm not a lawyer. My understanding of the word from my lawyer is that sex toys are often not considered obscene, whereas pornography is. So I can believe that if you have, and it's mostly down to payment processors, you've got somebody that's unhappy with porn, they may still be okay with sex toys. So yeah, it's kind of complicated. But if you're interested, follow up with me later. Thank you again, everybody, for coming out. I really appreciated it. I hope you had fun. Slides are up. I'll be around the con all day tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I'm going to do a short brief and then we're going to do Q&A. But I am a pissed off, cranky old guy, so get in here. Yes, I want video. I'm not seeing it. No. No, shit, I wasn't expecting anyone to show up. You know, they keep downgrading me. Next, I'll get Olsen, and then they'll put me in the men's room, you know, so. Two perverts in the back, you know. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh, you got to sign in.
Oh, what? What am I doing? Okay. I've got wireless on. Oh, you're so clever. I want to be able to. Oh, good. Hey, all right. Okay. So let's get in here. Documents. And, yeah, this boat purchase was right before I became unemployed. There's a 51-foot Beneteau Oceanus with 4 cabins and 4. It's a 1992. I can get it for half price. It's in Panama. You know, it's like one of the first conferences I was here at. Emmanuel auctioned off the keys to the Jaguar. And so then he handed out the keys, and the guy said, well, where's the car? He said, I don't know. Good auction. Yeah, don't go there. At least I was smart enough not to get the last 2 pieces of shit. Okay, conferences, here we go. And let's get in there. And Internet New York City. And open everything the 19th. And okay, so how do I turn this into, is this it? Yeah, okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go very, very quickly through the slides that I delivered at Liberation Technology Conference. David Solomonoff, the president of the New York thing. That's great, Greg. Thank you. Everybody who's here in an hour gets a book. I just want to just show these slides now. You all know tiny URLs, /tinyurl OSE-2014. OSE-2014. That stands for Open Source Everything 2014 with a hyphen. You can find the actual superior videotape of my delivery of the Open Source Everything Manifesto lecture at Liberation Technology. So I'm just gonna show you these slides real quick. And here you can see the tiny URL down at the bottom, OSE-2014. This is the book. I'm sorry, it's the only book that I sold my soul for, to put it into bookstores, so I don't own it. It is available on Pirate Bay, but when I went to get it, I got all kinds of virus shit. And so if someone can give me a clean copy of my own book, I'll post it at my website for people to download, because all my other books are free online. It's never been about money. So I went through key negative trends, key positive trends, revolution simplified. This is the revolution. In 1976, I did my first graduate thesis on predicting revolution, and it's still looking very, very good. And here in red are all of the preconditions of revolution that exist in the United States today, as well as the United Kingdom. And what we're missing is a precipitant. And I will tell you right now, I think that precipitant is going to be a pedophilia scandal that will knock your socks off. Because we have tens of thousands of sex slaves between Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. And these kids are killed when they run out of their useful life. That is something that is going to so shock people that I think it will break the back of the dynamic in which people are very tolerant of the elites getting away with, quite literally, abuse and murder. A few complicated slides. This is the open source everything slide. This came to me directly from God after he finished talking to George Bush. And I like it. And OpenBTS is there. You know, I've been familiar with OpenBTS for a long time. I'm a fan of David Weinberger and Open Spectrum. And the bottom line is we need all of the opens together as an ecology. We cannot do one open alone. I mean, when ESRI talks about open data, they're saying, give us all your data, we want to fuck you with our proprietary software. Okay, so you have to have open source software, open source hardware, open spectrum, open cloud, the whole bit. And this is the design that we did. This is my geek slide. You can go get it. This is actually Robert Garrigue. I want to honor Robert Garrigue. He died in a hotel room alone at about the age of 51. He was an extremely fit person. I still don't know why he died, but he died way too young. He was one of the very first people to really understand that security is about trust. It's not about control. And I tried sharing this slide with the guy that replaced Keith Alexander, and he just doesn't get it. The red side is the top-down hierarchical control asshole approach to security. The green side is what we should be doing. And I credit all of these ideas to Robert Garrigue. I stand on the shoulders of others. Some of you know I read a lot. 98 categories listed at Phi Beta Iota under the book page. And these are some of the lists that I've put together. And two books in particular that have really impressed me this past few years are Governing the Commons, which the lady got a Nobel Prize for demonstrating that essentially hybrid governance and governance in which the people themselves are developing the rules and also doing the monitoring and the policing. Like in fisheries, if everyone who is doing the fishing is part of the rulemaking and part of the enforcement, it works. On the other hand, if you have hired thugs from Blackwater, it doesn't work, okay? And then Stop Thief. I really, really believe that the commons is a concept that has to come to cyberspace. And I've heard a lot of that this time around. Open spectrum is, in fact, the territorial integrity of the people. It cannot and should not be owned. This is my favorite slide. It took me 25 years to get to this slide. And you can go get the brief to figure it out later. This is what I want to build. If anyone has $100 million, I'll give you my email. But essentially, we're fucked. I mean, it's not just the US government that's hosed. It's New York University and Columbia University and Harvard and all of these people. They're all stovepiped. They're all talking out their ass, and none of them are really sharing information or making sense. I do cite, how many people know about citation analysis, citation analytics? All right, well, as a freshman in college, I knew more about citation analytics than the vice chairman of the National Intelligence Council 20 years later. This is not something academics do, and they should. Citation analytics means you use the social science citation index or the science citation index to find out who the fuck is writing serious stuff. And that's based on citations. And so you create a list of the top 100 people in your field or domain, and then you start following that out to the other disciplines. And then you interview those people to get to who are the top people that are not publishing. And that's how you actually get to a grasp of ground truth. Well, our intelligence community doesn't do that. They talk to whatever 14 assholes have clearances and are being made available by SAIC, which is a prescription for instant stupidity. So what I want to build is a school of future-oriented hybrid governance. There are 8 tribes, 8 information networks: academic, civil society, government, commerce, government, law enforcement, media, military, non-government, nonprofit. And I want to build the World Brain Institute, and these are the 4 things. I own 3 of these 4 URLs. I don't have .edu yet. And I want to build a global serious game. Medard Gabel, who was the co-creator with Buckminster Fuller of the Analog World game, I paid for him to build the architecture back when I was a minor millionaire. I paid for him, which I'm not anymore. I'm selling these pins for $10 each, if anyone wants to support me getting back home. But I paid for him to design the architecture, and for under $5 million a year, we can create the world brain. I mean, the global game, the piece that actually has true cost economics and all of the actual feedback loops and relationships between things, like water. We all know Keith Alexander is an evil person, but he's also much stupider than you might realize. The NSA Center in Utah, which is a water-starved state, requires 1.7 million gallons of clean water every single fucking day to cool. Okay, what kind of moron puts a supercomputer center in a water-starved state? Okay, so these are the kinds of things that true cost economics helps you think about, and you have to actually take it into serious consideration. That's some real estate I want. The United Nations has lots of problems, but this is the big picture, and that's the end of the slideshow. So, who has a question? Yes, sir. Oh, God. Damn, we have a genius in the crowd. Thank you. I'm honored by your interest.
Can you say something about open news versus corporate-owned news agencies?
Why is there feedback on that thing? Say something about open news as opposed to corporate Robert Murdoch or Rupert Murdoch. Okay. One of the really things, I got into open source intelligence when I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command. I was the senior civilian, and I spent $20 million on access to top secret everything. And then I had, this was 1988 now, so I had one little PC with access to the source, okay, back in 88. And inside of a week, my analysts started lining up for that. And I said, what on earth are you doing? And they said, there's nothing in the secret database about Haiti, Burundi, Somalia, or whatever, okay? So one of the problems we have with the secret system is it is very narrowly focused, and it's based on secret sources and methods that are like a Cadillac running on a superhighway between Moscow and Washington, D.C. It's not adaptable. So you can't turn a Cadillac on a superhighway into 10 Jeeps, 100 motorcycles, 1,000 bicycles, and 15 million pedestrians, which is what you actually need to do open source. Now, the difference between news and intelligence, or data, information, and intelligence is very important. I mean, data is the raw datum. Information is that stuff which is broadcast, and information is like an artwork. It has a provenance. I mean, if it's from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, it's 50% shit, okay? I mean, these people still think that Abdullah in Afghanistan is half Pashtun. And the New York Times lawyers are so fucking stupid that they wouldn't actually go do the research in Afghanistan, where I was, where I read his bio, translated in Dari. He is 100% Tajik. It is not possible for him to win a national election. What we have just seen in Afghanistan is a major covert action trying to throw Ghani under the bus in order to cut a deal with Iran on a nuclear arrangement, which Iran has now written off, okay? Ghani won the election, 60-40, but there has been a major covert action in which the U.S. and Iran had a coincidence of interest in having Abdullah fraudulently win that election. So intelligence is when you move past news and you get to answers to a specific question, such as who actually won this election. Now, to get to that, we had to do polling. The State Department canceled all of its polls in Afghanistan because they knew that the polls would show that Abdullah was being elected fraudulently. And so someone else came in and ran polls, and we popped that bubble. I'm very proud of having been part of popping the bubble on trying to fraudulently elect Abdullah, because that would have led to Iranian control of the wealth in the north and the west, and it would have led to Pakistan oversight over a divided Pashtun tribe, which is all about protecting the Durand Line, which is a British imposition. Dividing tribes is not a good idea, okay? It causes issues. So data, information, and then intelligence. Now, anybody can do intelligence. My second book, and there are copies in those boxes back there. And by the way, my intent is that anyone who wants a book, take it. In fact, take 5 or 6, and if you can sell them, that's great. And if you want to send me 50% as a contribution to Earth Intelligence Network, thank you. But there's no obligation. All right, so my hope is the books will vanish and at least half of you will be guilted into contributing $5 to $10, okay? This is my gift-guilt economy model, all right? Well, I don't know, I mean, I come here, I get more value from you guys than I give. I mean, I love coming here. This is, for me, is a refreshing break from lying assholes. I really, truly thrive in this environment. But coming back to intelligence. Intelligence